Los dejo con Hedy, quien les presentará reducir las ausencias para aumentar los logros, los efectos de la inasistencia crónica en la primera infancia.
This one, okay. Great. Buenos días. Thank you so much for inviting me here. It's such a pleasure to be able to come here and to share some of what we are learning in the United States. My hope is some of it feels relevant and useful to hear, but what I also know is that you're going to have to translate what I offer and make it your own, and make it work for your own culture and languages and the systems that you have here. I'm going to, so my topic is about attendance. And I know that in the United States, one of my challenges is people often don't think about attendance. And they don't think that it's connected to achievement. In the United States, our teachers and principals or heads of schools will say, well, we're being held accountable for how well our kids test. Why are you sort of bothering me with asking about these issues of attendance? And what I think we forget is that if children aren't there essentially every day, they don't benefit from what we're offering in classrooms. So you don't get achievement every year, and over time, that achievement every year is what you get for attainment over time. But attendance isn't just important for kids to benefit for instruction. It is also itself a life and a work skill. Because eventually, when you get a job, you have to learn to show up every day to keep the job. And I know, as a mother of teenagers, that if I didn't teach my kids certain skills when they were little, when I try to teach them now, when my 16-year-old's bigger than I am, it's a lot harder. So the opportunity that you have to develop these skills while children are young is so essential. But I also want to point out that what's so important is that you're talking about this both about quality and about attendance in the same breath. Because attendance matters when you have high quality teaching in classrooms. More time in bad quality care is not actually going to get you to better outcomes. But when you combine the two, it's very, very powerful. I want to try, first one thing is I want to see in your heads, how much time do you think, how much school is it okay to miss? So take out a piece of paper and write down, in a month, how many days in a month do you think a child can miss and they'll still be okay, assuming a high quality program? Okay. How many of you said, I'm thinking, how many of you said 5 or more days? Anyone? Raise your hand if you said 5 or more days. 4 or more days. A few? 3 or 4 hands? 3 or more days. Few more hands? 2 or more days. About half of you? 1 or more days. Okay, 0 days. A few people. All right, we're going to go to the next slide. Oops, I forgot I have the controller. So we've been defining chronic absence as missing 10% or more of the school year. And that's at Attendance Works, and that's because we have lots of research that shows missing 10% or more has a detrimental impact on achievement. By the way, there is some data that shows that it can be less than that. Just missing 5% actually can be connected to lower outcomes. But I've chosen 10% because 10% is just 2 days a month. And I also know that I can't, if you will, there's an expression in English, cry wolf. You can't, if it was just 1 day and I started contacting parents after just 1 day, I think they'd look at me and think I was crazy. So I need to have enough days that parents will believe me that I think it's consequential. And I know for sure from all the research that a number of colleagues in research institutions across the country have begun to carry out, that two or more days just a month is actually a problem. And for us, I include all absences. Again, this may be very US-based, but we have this idea of excused absences. Have parents given excuse? Or unexcused absences, when kids miss school, but they don't have permission. Or suspensions, which kids can be told they can't come to school because they did some poor behavior. And unfortunately, in the United States, sometimes kids are suspended for, I don't think, are very good reasons. Sometimes they're suspended because they wear the wrong school uniform, or they don't wear the uniform. Or sometimes, so truancy is unexcused absences. This is one of the ones that drives me the most nuts. Kids get suspended because they were truant, and they'll say your punishment is more days out of school, or because they talk back to a teacher. Sometimes kids are suspended, but those 3 reasons, I don't care why you are not in school. If you're not in school, you're not benefiting from the instruction being offered in the classroom. One reason why this is so easy to miss is that sometimes it's just a day here or there, a couple days here or there. They're not all days in a row. And they can really easily add up to 10% over the course of the school year. So that'd be 20 days here. You usually have a 200-day school year. In the United States, we typically have a 180-day school year. This is data from a couple of school districts in the United States. And it shows that you can even have what's called a 95% average daily attendance and still have a fair number of kids who are chronically absent. So imagine a school of 200 children. 10 kids don't show up one day, right? That's 95% attendance. The 10 empty seats are not always filled by the same 10 children from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, right? They probably wouldn't be in the school if they never, ever, ever showed up to school. One way you could get 10 empty seats is all 200 children each miss 9 days each. I've never been in a school where every child missed the exact same numbers of days, right? Usually you have a few kids who miss nothing, a few kids who miss a little bit. The question is, how many kids are missing a lot of school? So if you had 50 kids, each who missed 20 days, that's 1,000 absences. You'd still have 800 absences. This is a 180-day school year, so I didn't translate it to your 200-day. You'd still have another, 800 absences left over for the other kids to split up. So you can have 95%, which in the United States often people thought was good attendance, and have really high levels of chronic absence. In preschools, our preschools are held accountable for 85% average daily attendance, and I'm seeing chronic absence levels of 40, 50%. Here, your data is suggesting you have some very high levels of chronic absence. So this is your pre-K data. It's over 2/3 of your kids are missing 10% or more of school. And even in your kindergarten data, it's over 2/3 of your kids. So I'm going to talk a moment, if I can make it the slide deck move, about why this matters. So this is data from Chicago, which has been investing in high-quality preschools. So they've been working hard to improve their public preschools. And what they show, oops, didn't mean to move. This is different measures of whether kids are prepared to do well. Math, recognizing letters, your alphabet, social emotional development. And for every single measure, if kids were chronically absent, it was associated with lower levels. And actually, this wasn't controlling for prior knowledge. The kids who came in with the least prior knowledge actually were affected the most. Because the kids who have the least prior knowledge are often with families who probably are have the least language and literacy skills going on at home. So they're more dependent on preschool to provide that language-rich literacy environment that will help them learn to read. So there's actually research that shows for low-income kids, every day missed of the early years actually has a 75% greater impact than for affluent kids. I'm going to do an exercise, so I need 3 volunteers. Thank you, Frances. She's modeling good behavior. I need 2 more. I promise I won't bite. Oh, someone, come on. It'll go faster if we get a couple volunteers. Okay, thank you. So your names? Your name?
Mercedes.
Mercedes, okay. I want you to stand right here, Mercedes. Francis, you'll stay next. No, you're going to face this way.
Okay.
You're facing me. Facing me. And you're facing me also, next to each other. And then your name is?
Marco.
Marco. Okay. Marco, Francis, and Mercedes are all 5 years old, and this is their first day of kindergarten. Yay! But Mercedes here, she didn't get into Un Bien Comienzo. And Un Bien Comienzo right now has really figured out how to make teaching high quality, so kids are really learning. So Mercedes, can you take 8 steps back, please? All right, we'll do 9, 10, because you guys have a longer school year. So those were all those months when she was not able to benefit from this. Now, Frances was in Un Bien Comienzo, but she had a lot of trouble attending. Things would come up, she didn't get there very often. She only got about half the benefit. 5 steps back, please. But Marco here, he's doing great. He's starting ready to learn. And now they're in kindergarten, and they all got a really high-quality teacher. So you all get to take 10 steps forward. And Marco's setting the pace. Y'all, everyone got 10. You all got an equally good, high-quality kindergarten teacher, because you made sure, and then we'll have you veer. But you know what happened? With Mercedes here, she had never been into kindergarten before. She had never gotten to the habit. She hadn't developed any of the, her family what hadn't practiced. She actually missed about 3 months altogether. The absences were adding up. So, Mercedes, you have to take 6 steps back, because it wasn't just the day that she missed, but the day she came back, she was kind of lost. Because she hadn't gotten the instruction. She didn't know what was going on in the classroom. She couldn't follow what was going on. Frances here, she missed only about a month and a half or so. Not quite as bad, because she was a little bit, so can you take 3 steps back? But Marco's doing well, he's great. And then we get into 1st grade, and I'm gonna have Marco turn that way and take 10 steps forward, and we can all take 10 steps forward again. And you're gonna pace, your teacher is the same quality teacher. You don't get to take bigger steps. About the same. But Merced is here. She was again chronically absent because she was still having, now she got a little bit better, but still not that much better. So Mercedes, will you take about 6 steps back? And you only missed a couple months, so now only 1 step back. So my question is, who here is going to be reading by 3rd grade? Marco, thank you. And I don't know if you all have similar research, but in the United States, what they found is children, if they're not reading on track proficiently by the end of 3rd grade, it's 70% likelihood they will never catch up. That was in the United States. Now, I think that is because, and I don't know if this is true here, by kind of the shift to 3rd to 4th grade, the expectation is by the end of 3rd grade, you're not just learning to read, you can now read to learn. So by 4th grade, if you can't read to learn, you're in really serious trouble because you're not just falling behind in reading, you're actually falling behind in all of your subjects. And it sort of escalates on itself. And I also think our curriculum often is so lockstep that it doesn't allow for differentiated instruction so that kids who are challenged can get the kind of supports they need. You're sort of supposed to be where everyone's supposed to be, and if you aren't, that's just kind of too bad. But this is the data that kind of, the bar chart illustration of what we just walked, which is what they found in Chicago every year of chronic absence starting in pre-K. So this last one is the kids who were chronically absent in pre-K, K1, and 2nd grade. By 2nd grade, according to this was a Dibble score, those kids needed intensive intervention. And reading, that is. And what we found was that for low-income kids, chronic absence in kindergarten predicted lower 5th grade outcomes. This is following this group of kids all the way down, even if your attendance in 3rd grade improved. Because we almost always see kids' attendance start to improve. But it's a delayed effect. You're chronically absent in kindergarten and 1st. So now you're not following as well what's going on in the classroom. Even if you're there in 3rd grade, but you're not following what's happening in the classroom, you can still be falling behind without continuing your chronic absence. This is one local school district where we work most closely, and what we found, if you followed kids in 1st grade up through 6th grade, kids who were chronically absent in 1st grade were almost 6 times more likely to be chronically absent in 6th grade. They had lower test scores and they had higher suspension rates. Because what I worry is that now you have a child, 3rd grade, they're not following. As they get older, instead of having people know that they can't figure out what's going on in the classroom, they misbehave, or they're bored, so they misbehave. That gets you into suspensions. And by 6th grade, well, what we found was if kids were chronically absent all 3 years, any 3 years in elementary school, they were 18 times more likely to be chronically absent in 6th grade. And I think what happened is we in the United States have only been looking at unexcused absences. Our kids missing without permission. And it kind of makes sense for older kids, but 5-year-olds don't decide, oh, I think I'll not tell mom and dad that I'm not going to go to school. Parents and community, they know kids are missing school. But those absences can add up. We've thought about attendance as compliance. Compliance with parents. Are kids telling me what? So if my older kid, missed school and he didn't tell me, then it's a problem. But if my younger kid missed school and I said it was okay, then it's not a problem. But if we think about attendance as equaling opportunity to learn, and you have great opportunities to learn in the classroom, then every day missed of that opportunity to learn has consequences. And what we know in our data from the United States is that middle and high school attendance affects high school graduation. So this is any year of chronic absence. This is actually the state of Utah. I happen to have their data. I got University of Utah to crunch the numbers. Was 3 times more likely to drop out by the end of high school. Any 2 years between 8th and 12th grade is 50%. And I will say that as kids get older, anything that's a scaffolded subject that teachers teach, so let's say algebra. My husband's here, so he knows this. What was a real relief to me was when I realized that to get my kid to pass algebra, it was not about me teaching my child algebra. I may have passed algebra, but I wasn't going to be able to teach him well. And even when we had some challenges, sometimes parents teaching their kids, it's not such a good scene. Now, we're middle-class parents. When my kid had trouble with algebra, we hired a tutor eventually. That's how we made sure he got all the subjects. But we have resources. Low-income families don't have those resources. And guess what? If your kid, this was actually not why he was having trouble, but that's a different story. But if your kid started to miss every, 2-3 days the first month of algebra class, I guarantee you, it's going to be pretty hard to pass. So this value of showing up to school, even when you don't want to be there, will pay off in middle and high school, especially because once you get to these subjects where you depend on the teacher to teach you, your parents, your family, or for low-income families where this may always have been true, they can't make up for what's being taught in the classroom. So, one of the keys, though, to turning around chronic absence is we can't assume we know why it's happening. And finding out why it's happening is really essential and important to being able to find a solution. Some of this are the myths. So in the United States, at least, this is what we found. It's, the belief that it only matters if it's unexcused. It's the not seeing them adding up. It's thinking that it only matters in middle and high school. It doesn't really matter when kids are as young as preschool, kindergarten, first grade. Sometimes it's real barriers. Is it a lack of access to health care and you have chronic disease, poor transportation, no safe path to school? And sometimes it's also aversion. This is the connection also to quality. If you have poor quality teaching, kids don't like to be in the classroom. But sometimes aversion, especially among young children, is a much more, it's not about the quality of teaching, but you have a lot of anxiety when kids are little. So when kids are, our son, when he was in kindergarten, pre-K actually, when he first went to pre-K, he wasn't so happy about it. I had to literally pry him off me to get him to be with his teacher, right? And you feel like as a parent, this is awful. What have I done to my child? Because he's crying so hard. But thank goodness I had a little background in child development, and I realized this was separation issues. But the other thing that kids sometimes do when they don't want to go to school, how many of you are parents? When your children don't want to go to school, what do they say? I'm sick. I've got a stomach ache, right? Wait, the day even in middle school they try to pull this off. I've got to just, oh mom, I have a stomach ache, I have a headache, right? Well, when it's anxiety among middle and high schoolers, we say, suck it up, go to school, right? When they're 5, we go, oh, my poor baby, you have a stomach ache. Maybe you should stay home with me, right? When that may not be actually the best thing. If it's a high-quality preschool, you want to just move them through the transition, and eventually it'll be better. And I will say that my preschool teacher, I'll remember him, this guy John, who imitated what kids were like when their parents left, and had this little girl who would cry like the devil when her mom left, and as soon as she thought her mom, she'd go, is he she gone yet? She gone yet? And she'd stop crying. And so when I would pry my child off me, that was the picture in my mind, because I thought, I bet he's doing that. I just have to get out of here and it'll be fine. So I just want, in the preschool years, that could be what's going on. But I also want to say, if you have a bad quality program, that may not be so simple. Your kid, when they're 4, can't tell you what's going on. They just may be so anxious. So that's one of the things we have to help parents. How do you know what's anxiety? How do you know when it's real concerns? And as kids get older, though, there's other reasons of absence that can be challenging. And I also will say, if parents themselves had a negative experience in school, you can also see them be reluctant to put their children in school, because they'll remember that experience. And what you're going to have to do is help parents learn what you're doing so they trust you. So I have a question for you all. So turn to the person next to you. I want to find out, when you were little, what is something that helped you go to school, even when it was difficult? So turn to the person next to you. Just share. Okay, if you can see me, hold up your hand. If you can see me, put your finger on your mouth. All right, what are some answers that came up? Can you call out loud? Friends.
It wasn't an option.
Not an option.
Not an option.
Okay,
Friends.
what are some other things? What else?
Positive reinforcement
Positive reinforcement from whom?
from a teacher.
From a teacher. Recess. Recess is good.
My elder sister attended the same school.
Your older sister, siblings are really helpful, huh? Any other things? What helped you get to school? Sports. There's something happening at school that you liked, right? All right, those are all really important things. And you can use your common sense to think about what will help kids get to school. Now, I want to talk about, and we'll get more into solutions a bit, but what I think about what helps families get their children to school is it's a matter of both hope, faith, and capacity. And why do I say that? Part of putting your kids in school is you actually have hope for a different future for your child. Now, I think every parent, when their child is born, starts off with hope. I also think some parents lose hope as their kids are born. And I will say this again, this is in the United States. I live in San Francisco, and I work with my own public schools, where my kids are there. We have not a very high chronic absence rate for the school district. It's about 9%. But in our public housing projects, these are subsidized housing with low-income families, chronic absence is over 50% for those children. But in our public housing projects, there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of environmental health hazards. So there's a lot of asthma. There's a lot of huge challenges. But I worry most about the violence, because I've seen kids, like in one public housing project, there's one neighborhood I've stayed very close to the residents there. And over the summer, for example, one of the youth workers was shot dead in front of 60 kids, including his own son. And they proceeded to have 3 more shootings and their parents of kids in that neighborhood. That neighborhood, families are losing hope. I know they are, because it's awfully hard to see that happen and not wonder what it's all for. I also know in that neighborhood that there are some of friends of mine who are keeping hope because they live in that neighborhood, they grew up in that neighborhood, and they made it despite the odds. And they help to instill the hope that even though it's really tough, I can make it. But I also want to say that what teachers will do to respond to that situation will be important for keeping faith. Because one of the other things, you said positive reinforcement from a teacher. Let's say a kid walks into a classroom and they're acting out. If that teacher, so one of the challenges we have in the United States, and I don't know if it's here, the teachers in our low-income neighborhoods don't live in those neighborhoods. So they may or may not have heard that this is what happened. Let's say a little boy comes in and acts out. At the moment that child and that family might most need my understanding, if I act negatively because I think that kid's misbehaving and scold him, I'll just add, I'll trigger more trauma. And then when I send him home, his parents will think, you don't understand. But what makes parents send their children, what made me send my children to teachers, is I knew those teachers loved my kids, cared for my kids, and had my child's best interest, and were going to understand who I came from, where I came from. Well, I know teachers, again, this is my same situation in our town in San Francisco. Sometimes kids go to a school in a different neighborhood because they're trying to get out of some of the violence, but they're taking multiple buses. Transportation is very difficult. So sometimes they're late, not showing up. Now, if a teacher on the other side of town says to that kid, because that parent had hope, but says, why can't you care enough about your education to get here on time? You're going to ruin the hope that that child has, and ruin the faith, rather, that that child has, that you know what you're doing and you're part of helping realize their hope. But then there are the issues of capacity, the knowledge that absences add up, the skills, the transportation, the resources. And what I often say is, if kids aren't showing up to school, we have to unpack, where is this breaking down? Is it about hope? They've lost their hope. Is it about faith, because they don't have faith that what we offer is going to help realize that hope? Or is it about skills, knowledge, and resources, because those things are in place? Because if we don't diagnose it right, we may not come up with the solution that works. And even with the solutions, if the kid has a health issue, let's say they have asthma, but the problem is they don't trust that my school knows what to do if my child has an asthma attack. Even though they not have the knowledge that absences can add up, they may not send that child to school to me because they're not sure that I know what I'm doing. We know, though, that part of what connects to parents' faith in a school and getting to that future is how much they understand what's happening right now in that school connects. This is actually data from Chicago on preschool. And all parents said that they believed attendance mattered. Because when you ask parents, does attendance matter? They'll say yeah. They kind of are smart. But whether they know how much attendance matters now in preschool actually made a big difference. And actually kids whose parents understood what kids were learning in preschool and understood that going to school tomorrow in preschool mattered actually had better attendance. Another thing that makes a difference, this is just things for you to know what preschools can do, is that the climate of a preschool is also connected to preschool, to attendance. So I see the principal and the head of curriculum for Captain Avalos. Can you raise your hand? And the teacher. They were so warm and welcoming and had me come to their school yesterday so I could learn a little bit about your situation here. And what I saw was a school that was truly grounded in its community, that welcomed its parents, that created an opportunity for families to understand what was going on. And I know that they're having better attendance. And I think of it because some of these sense of safety, the sense of trust, the knowledge, the teacher is there who's just so committed and you can see that passion coming through. Those things do make a difference. We have research. You have your own local examples of how that makes a difference on whether or not parents come to school or take their children to school. But we also know that there's a set of really good practice that can happen at the school site level. It has to happen at the school level. Ideally, sometimes with community partners, but you have to recognize good and improved attendance. This isn't perfect attendance, because if you do perfect attendance, this is something that happens again in the United States. They'll say, a child who comes to school all semester long, perfect attendance, will give them a reward. But the kids who need it most, they're not even on track for the reward within the first month of school because they, especially low-income kids, face greater challenges. You're trying to motivate kids to overcome the challenges to come to school. So you have to do it like every week. Did you have 5 days of good attendance? 5 days of good attendance, then we'll recognize you so that kids can see that they can always get better. You have to have engagement of kids and families because we know that too often families don't know that absences can up, and they also underestimate their ability to help each other. In the United States, one of the things that we've done, so for example, in one of these low-income public housing projects in my city, they're doing a walking school bus. So parents organize it, and you find out who are the kids, and you pick up kids along the route. And as they're organizing the walking school bus, they're telling the other parents, we're doing this because our kids going to school every day matters. But some of these kids are actually living with their grandparents, and the grandparents sometimes aren't so healthy, right? And sometimes the walking school bus makes sure that they can get their grandkid to school, because if they're not feeling good, they might not be able to get their kid to school by themselves. Then you need to have personalized contact or outreach, early outreach or contact. It's because it's someone reaching out and asking me directly, how's my child doing? Did you know how often they're missing? I really want them to, I'm wondering why you aren't there, so that someone notices in a caring way that my child's missing school. And then you have to have folks looking at the data to look at, do we have patterns? Is it kids from certain places? Is it certain days of the week? Is it certain issues that are challenges? In one school, and this is actually in Providence, Rhode Island, when they asked the parents why their kids were missing school, they found out that these parents were working the night shift, and they were falling asleep before they could get their kids to school. So what the school did was they opened up an early morning breakfast club that the parents could drop off soon after their shift ended. The kids could be in school, get a warm breakfast, and the parents could go home and fall back asleep exhausted from having worked all night. But that meant you couldn't counsel one by one. You had to see whether there was a pattern, and you could have a programmatic solution. Some of the ways, by the way, that you can also engage kids and families is you can recognize what's going on. I was sharing, you can even have, this is something they're doing with 4-year-olds. It's a little set of cards where every day the kid marks off which one they had. Were they on time? Were they running late? Were they absent? And then you can actually add it up at the end of the week because you're teaching them to count. And you can tear off the bottom and give it to the parents. Another thing that we've created, and it's on my website actually in English and Spanish, is you have parents think about from the beginning, what are our goals? But also, what's your backup plan? What's your plan B? The key to plan Bs is they have to be created before you need them, right? So what if we got all the parents thinking about, how am I going to get my kids to school every day? And what happens if I'm sick and I can't take them? Or grandma's sick and she can't take them? Who else will help? I don't know, but my husband and I don't do all of this by ourselves. We're here because his aunt, my sister-in-law, showed up to make sure our kids were still going to school while we're here in Chile, you know? That's normal. We need help and support, and we need to find ways, though, that we can be planful about it. I suspect, by the way, this is something that's probably more of a Chilean strength than a US strength. We live pretty isolated from each other. You may even have more stronger networks to really be resourceful in helping your families. But what I also know is that you can use your data to identify who's at risk. The biggest predictor of chronic absence is prior chronic absence. It's not culture, it's not race, it's not class. It's the fact that you've been starting to engage in this behavior, whether it was last year or whether it's in the first month of school. So in Baltimore, Maryland, this is one city in the United States, they actually looked at, and the kids who were chronically absent, who had missed 4 more days in the first month of school, 90% of them went on to be chronically absent for the remainder of the year. 2 or more days, and 50% of them went on. The highest risk was that you started off the year being chronically absent. Doesn't mean that you can't fall into those patterns later on, but you know from the beginning who's challenged. And if you know from the beginning who's challenged, you can use that to think about, how do I target resources? Because it's not all of your kids, it's some of your kids. And so you can figure out adding in real supports. Now I'm going to try something, and I'm going to ask, and I know we only have 5 minutes left, so I'll be quick, Francis, to come up. So we're going to do a little role play. So this is our scenario, and I'm Jose's kindergarten teacher. And as you know, he's missed a few days of school. So I will admit, I'm modeling, well, you'll see what you think of my behavior. So you're Jose's mother, yes?
Yes.
You know, we need to talk. Jose has already missed 5 days of school. How can you let that happen? Don't you care about your child's future?
Yes, I care.
You know, a responsible parent would make sure that your child, haven't you been noticing how much he's missing school? How can I teach him?
Yes, but what's raining many days of this month?
5 days and you didn't notice? Okay, and all right. So I want you to just think about this for a second, for a moment, and I promise I'll try and end soon. Did what I do work? Do you think I convinced Frances to want to have her kid in my classroom? So I'm going to actually go to the punchline of what I think could have worked. So you got to frame conversations, and we often, especially when we're short in time, try to jump to like number 3. I jumped right to number 3. I'm telling you how much bad, the problem is. I didn't start to learn about who you are, build a relationship, find out what your dreams, hopes are. I didn't find time to let you know that I care about your kid. I just jumped into informing, which didn't lead to a discussion or a plan for action. So let's try this one again. Frances, do you have a moment to talk to me?
Yes, of course.
Oh, thank you so much for making the time. I just was wondering, how do you feel like Jose's doing? Is he liking school?
Yes, but some days he don't want to go to school. He feels very shy and don't have many friends.
Oh, really? Well, you know, when he's here, he's such a wonderful boy. I notice how he really thinks about the other kids. And whenever a kid is feeling sort of sad, he actually goes up to them one-on-one. And I love having him in my classroom. But I'm a little bit worried about the days missing. We are really trying to cover a lot. And I'm worried that he won't fully benefit from what's being taught. Have you been able to come in the classroom and see what he's learning?
No, not yet.
I'd love it if you would come, But I also wanted to let you know something, because we're really going to try and talk about this with all the parents. But the holidays are coming up, and I know that it's awfully tempting to spend time with family and friends, but we're trying, because we're so much that we have to cover, to make sure that every kid can be here most of the time. Do you think you could help us with that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. So, you know, you can just think about this, and we won't do this part, but there's a couple of things I want to offer up. We actually have scenarios, and we can also give it to the Fundación if they want to do it. We actually need to practice. Even, you know, I know this, and sometimes, like, okay, my husband's here, he'll vouch. I don't always go at everything in a relationship, trust-building kind of conversation, you know? We always have to practice to get better. And with parents, I think we often jump to trying to just get them to the behavior rather than building the relationship. And so how you do this, you may want to actually create scenarios, and you can actually not give everyone all the parts of the scenario and have them role play. We do this where someone's a parent, someone's a teacher, and someone is an observer. And they try, and first you do it without the guidelines, and then you do it with the guidelines, and have them practice trying to engage in a respectful conversation. And do this before they have parent-teacher conferences. Because again, this is hard behavior. You know, one of the things that I so appreciated about David's comments is it's hard to engage in the behavior that we know is right. You can even have it theoretically in your head, and you don't carry it out in practice. And that's the same thing with engaging parents. But we do know that these are certain key kinds of principles. We have to engage families early. We got to establish a positive relationship. This is about having strength-based approaches. Really believing that families have the best interests of kids in their heart because they know when you think badly of them. You got to check for understanding. You have to offer that support, and you got to remember that this happens over time. I know of a program in Portland where the person who does the engagement, the first time she talks to the family, she doesn't even bring up the attendance. She talks to them about 3 or 4 times if she saw they had poor attendance in the past. The first one is just to check in. The second one is to check in to just see what could be engaging. It's not until she's built a relationship that she tries to talk about the attendance challenges. Because often families, if they don't trust you, they actually won't tell you what are the challenges going on, and then you can't figure out how to solve the situation. But I do know that if you're going to invest in your quality improvements, those improvements are going to have little benefit unless kids are there to really take advantage of them. And I also know that attendance is a really solvable problem. And it's solvable when we take time to engage in the practice, build a culture. But one of the things I just wanted to comment I've been so impressed by is the commitment to continuous improvement. So I'm offering you some solutions that are from the United States. They may or may not work. I'm going to go back to Captain Avalos and the teacher who's sitting there. One of the things that I appreciated was she talked about how in her own classroom, they first gave her a set of strategies for improving attendance that just didn't quite work for her. They were a kind of complex board where kids had to report in on their attendance, and it was too hard. She couldn't do it with the 4-year-olds, so she created her own apple tree. So every time the kids come in, they hang their apple on the tree, and she created a story about that. That now becomes her own. She knows how to make it work. And what I'm so glad is that she didn't just assume that the solution would work, but she tried something. It's okay, you can make mistakes. The key is try to make the mistakes early and learn from them, and then try something until you get something that you know works. And you can use attendance data, because you're taking it every day. You can know by the end of the week, is this starting to work or is it not? And I think that's one of the beauties. So thank you very much.